Beautiful. Eziah, Syed, thank you for joining the Pain and Performance podcast, man.
Dr. Hines, thank you for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one, as we'll probably explore a little bit as we go through this. This is probably one of the biggest 180s that I've taken throughout my career of kind of, looking at the nutrition components of health, the supplemental components of health. I think very early on, whenever I got into healthcare, that was something that I almost thought of as taboo. No. We're not only are we not going to help with that, but I think it's bad to help with that stuff. And I could not have made a bigger 180 over the last, whatever it is, 12 to 15 years. But tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive into some of that stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because I feel like I'm hearing more and more of that. I recently spoke to an orthopedic surgeon at Hospital for Special Surgery who said to me, I've been practicing for 30 years, and only now am I starting to realize just how important nutrition is to outcomes. So there's a tidal, wave and shift coming to how people are thinking about this, even in conventional medicine. So I've spent my career as an entrepreneur, but also kind of steeped in innovation and strategy in large firms like Deloitte and Citibank, sort of at the enterprise level, really thinking about how's the world changing, what are the risks that these changes present to an enterprise, and then how do you position against those changes to make sure that you remain relevant. So a lot of that is kind of in the realm of technology, right? So, at Deloitte, we were looking at things like blockchain and big data and AI and all the disruptive tech domains that might impact our clients and us, and thinking about, how do we mobilize against this. So I've done a number of different tech companies, and most recently I'm at the helm of a company called Mend, which is in life sciences, and it really came about because of a result of health experiences in family. Mom got sick with cancer, recently had a total joint replacement. She's 80 years old. And I saw some of the kind of the issues and gaps that I saw in healthcare and her care. And then my brother had a very serious fall from a waterfall, and I saw some of the gaps there. And then I had an injury that was very slow to heal, and started really thinking about, hey, is there something wrong here? And really arrived at sort of a set of core theses that I'm sure we'll cover as to the very important role nutrition has to play in all of this, across my mom's situation, my brother's situation, mine, and so much of illness that exists in society.
Yeah, I had a patient who asked me this week, and it was very, very present because I was kind of prepping for our call. And she said, I had a friend who was doing kind of regenerative therapy and dry needling, and said the treatment didn't work for them. And she was like, I don't understand that, because when we talk about it, you're just explaining how all you're doing is tapping into the body's healing response. So how could that not work for him? You could see the disconnect in her brain. And so we started talking. We're like, most of these things are tapping into someone's natural ability to repair and heal things. And our body does a wonderful job of doing that, if it has the right tools, if it has the right building blocks. And when it doesn't, even these really, advanced things that we currently have in terms of regenerative therapy, peptides, stem cell, all these advanced treatments that are starting to come out, if the body doesn't have the building blocks to use those treatments effectively, then they quote unquote don't work. And so we were having the conversation with the patient that means there's something else going on in this person's system that is not allowing the body to heal. And a lot of times that is starting to look at the nutrition component, the inflammatory component. What are they missing? What's not in the body? Or what is in the body that's not supposed to be there on either side, and how do we help that? And I was like, if we don't fix that, this patient could go and have surgeries, they could have injections, they could do all this stuff, and they're not going to get the results they want. So it was so prevalent, but it was amazing to see somebody just the light bulb go off, and she was just like, so he has no idea that there's something missing that is preventing him from getting the care. It's not that the treatment was bad. There's something else that's supposed to be there or not supposed to be there that needs to be addressed, or nothing else is going to work. So that's
that was my aha as well. So I was in a boot from a stress fracture for what ended up being way longer than the normal healing response time, and I pride myself in generally being pretty healthy, and I was exercising and training for the New York Marathon, and I was at my wits in terms of the time was required to heal. Went back to my podiatrist and said, look, I'm still experiencing pain in the foot. And he did a scan and showed that bone hadn't fully healed, and said, basically, I said, what more should I be doing to kind of heal? And he said, go home and rest. Literally, he said that. He said, go home and rest. Healing's different for everybody. There's nothing you can do. And I was annoyed by that response because I thought, there's something wrong here. I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew there was something wrong. And I started to contemplate, geez, am I low in vitamin D because I'm South Asian, Middle Eastern, and haven't had enough exposure to the sun? Maybe my body's low on vitamin D. And so I went home and started to research that relationship, and you've articulated it perfectly, which is the core building blocks. There's a cellular process taking place. Your body is looking to borrow from other resources for energy. Your immune response needs to be fueled, and then it needs those core building blocks of whatever it is trying to repair. And there's very complicated processes involved. And if we don't have those core building blocks in enough supply, and the research shows that even a small trauma can raise the body's metabolic demands by as much as 25%. More serious trauma or injury or surgery can raise it quite significantly. And we're not trained to think about it that way. We think about rest, we think about icing it, we think about compression and heat and elevation, all those types of things, but we're just not told that your body needs to be nourished better. And so we think this is a paradigm shift coming, and it's one of the things that we're really focused on in medicine.
Yeah, it's, we talk about it a lot on the back end of healthcare training, in that, everyone, no matter where you went to school or how it was, whether it was med school, physical therapy school, I've spoken to chiropractors, everyone across the board comes out feeling inadequate in the kind of nutrition, micronutrients, and vitamin world. They're like, people ask me questions, and I'm like, they didn't teach us that. They didn't talk to us about that. So, it's one of those things, like, I feel like it almost has to come full circle. Like, people are realizing how important, and the research continues to grow. And so it forces, physicians, practitioners, doctors to keep building their skill set to help people. And then at some point that has to go back and infiltrate our education system. So we're actually putting people out who can help on this level, at least, adequately. Obviously, you want them to continue kind of growing and learning, but it's interesting how long it takes to get back there.
Yeah, you even hit the nail on the head again on a couple of things. One is, the level of evidence has now grown to a point where it can't be ignored. So we've got a body of now like a dozen randomized trials in one of our formulations. I'm sure we'll get back to that. That when we go now to mainstream physicians, more so orthopedics, and we present that data, you can't ignore it. There's a clear indication there of better patient outcomes. And the other thing is, most physicians will tell you, just as you've stated, that you get maximum sort of 20 hours of training and all their schooling on nutrition. And so we're, as a company, taking that on. We're about to announce, which we're really excited about, in the musculoskeletal realm, the first set of CEU courses that are designed for PTs and orthopedic surgeons, et cetera, that is specifically designed to give them baseline education, and then they can take them through a module of courses on giving them fluency in nutrition. And that is, again, a news announcement will go out soon, is being supported by the American Physical Therapy Association. We've got two of the national leaders at PT, ATI, and IV Rehab that are instructors in the course. And everybody that I speak to now understands the importance of this, but they're figuring out how to deploy it in clinical practice. And so I think that'll be the next wave, as we get everyone educated on the evidence, and the science is now making it mainstream in clinical practice.
Yeah, we'll have to dive into some of that stuff. I have spoken on this subject a ton at different conferences, and it's interesting the way that I've been asked to speak on it is to not just come in and say we're going to improve outcomes, but to always tie it to the business, because they're like, look, they'll listen if you can explain how it'll impact the business, and then trick them into improving patient outcomes. Right. I'm like, look, there's no tricks. Like, this is if there's a definition of a win-win, if you're giving your patients the best education and building blocks you can to improve their baseline health, everything else you do works better. Whether you're a surgeon, whether you're a PT, whether you're a chiropractor, whether you're massage, whatever that professional degree is, if you can elevate their baseline of health, you're going to look like you're much better, because their body is going to listen to whatever you're telling it to much better. But it's interesting. Like, it's I think as much as we know this, there's probably still some resistance in the professional community. We're all hard-headed, unfortunately. I'm sure you are you are learning that. But it's amazing that the associations are starting to come around. How long has that been in the works?
Yeah, and I'll say the converse of what you just said, which is you can be the best clinician in the world, and if your patient's baseline is low, you're not going to get the outcomes that you're looking for, and that's part of the challenges. Are societally, if you look at the numbers, 50% of our population is forecast to be pre-diabetic or diabetic by the end of this year. Metabolic syndrome's on the rise, cardiovascular disease is on the rise, and we spent $4 trillion in this year on healthcare costs, and a lot of it is preventable chronic conditions, totally preventable chronic conditions. Simple lifestyle modification factors could address a lot of disease. So we've been at this for a handful of years, from kind of conception to bringing it to where it is today. When I first went into health systems to speak to doctors, there was a lot of skepticism, quite significant amount of skepticism, that we're really focused right now on orthopedics. But now whenever I go and speak Dr. Hines to MDs, I'm invariably hearing a completely different response, which is, we know this is important, we're behind the eight ball, we're behind in this area, and we need to catch up. So I think the evidence has become established to a point where even at Hospital for Special Surgery, when number one in orthopedics for the last, whatever it is, 15 years, they invited us to be part of a nutrition showcase, and all the physicians were invited. So for an institution of that stature to actually hold a nutrition showcase and invite all the surgeons to attend just shows kind of where the conversations come. It's come quite far, and nobody's now doubting that the science is there.
I'm curious, do you think that has been pushed forward due to the last 3 years of us kind of just realizing, hey, as a society, we were faced with this test. We failed miserably in terms of how healthy our base levels of just, protective levels of vitamin D, vitamin C, these what we kind of considered, not really relevant deficiencies, and then we have this massive health crisis that really tests our levels. Are we maybe we're not deficient, but are we in optimal ranges? And it just wasn't the case across the large portion of the population. Do you think that has something to do with this kind of speeding up and getting everybody on board faster?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think one is there's been very large studies, sort of population health level studies that have been done that showed widespread deficiencies in key nutrients, right? So these studies, one was 16,000 people by the Journal of Nutrition, that concluded that we're overfed and undernourished. And so that's become common vernacular now, and sort of in the nutrition circles, that society, we eat a lot, but we're undernourished. And the other thing is, large-scale hospital studies have been done that have shown patients are going into a acute care environment undernourished, and that compromises outcomes. So there's that whole body of research around, hey, people are undernourished. Then the other side of it is, enough data has been published now that shows that nutritional manipulation, we'll just call it that, in a very short period of time can actually improve outcomes. So, for example, our studies have shown that you can actually enhance return to function after a surgery. That's pretty profound, that you can preserve more muscle, that muscle works better, and the patient's up on their feet faster, doing better physical therapy, lower inflammation, better overall response. And the most recent paper published showed that those results persisted for 2 years versus placebo in the population that had the intervention. Like that's incredible. That 2 years later, patients still had better muscle, still had better strength, just because of an intervention that was delivered in the perioperative environment. So it's a combination of those two things, which is there's a lot of data showing that we're in a very poor state, and there's a lot of data now showing that we can actually have an impact in a very short period of time through nutritional manipulation.
In the study that you're talking about, was the intervention just improving protein intake? Were they supplementing with protein? What was that?
Yeah, it was actually a free-form essential amino acids in a fairly high dose, taken pre-surgery and post-surgery. In this particular case, it was 1 week pre-op and 2 weeks post-op. What the intervention showed was a mitigation of muscle atrophy, better return to function and activities of daily living, a lower inflammatory environment. We actually did biopsies of the tissue. Our scientists, Dr. Syed and Dr. Owen, that actually showed in the intervention population that the inflammatory environment was more favorable. So IL-6 was down, TNF-alpha was down, and when macrophages were down, and that the muscle T cells were up, which is really, again, quite extraordinary. And when you think about it, just in 1 week of taking in nutritional intervention, the body recognized that nutrient and created an immune response. Like that's what we should actually expect. You feed a plant that is suffocating on lack of water, and all of a sudden you give it, a jug of water, it starts to sprout and show life again. And the human body is no different. If you feed the right nutrients, it gets a pretty quick response.
What are some of the other things, like as y'all have gone through this and y'all are compiling all the kind of data around what things move the needle on people's recovery? Let's spend a few minutes kind of going through some of those things that really jump out to you as like, these are the heavy hitters, the kind of top 4 or 5 things that really move the needle when it comes to like healing and recovery.
Yeah, I think so. Clearly, we've focused a lot of our research on orthopedics, and we've got more randomized trials happening this year. And depending on the orthopedic outcome, the things that really cause problems are things like muscle atrophy, wound healing, infection risk, inflammation that causes persistent pain and delayed recovery. And there is now evidence that we can influence all of those, right? So we know, for example, that leucine is a key compound in muscle protein synthesis, and you need it in certain amounts to be able to get the body actually synthesizing protein. And it turns out that it's 2.5 grams of leucine at minimum to get that kind of response. In the inflammatory world, we've got a product that's leveraging 4 key compounds that are very well studied and well known. One is obviously curcumin that everybody knows, and something that's in turmeric. Tart cherry, ginger, and ashwagandha, all with established body of data showing real beneficial impacts to inflammation. Similarly, in the wound healing side, there's a compound called glutamine that has got lots of really good data on its effects. And there's another one called arginine that is an amino that has really important effects on wound healing. So we know now there's an established body of data around these certain compounds in orthopedics that can be leveraged to address some of the most important things that we see as being problematic. The other thing that you see in, surgeons won't operate if blood albumin is not at a sufficient level, and that's an indicator of malnourishment. So we know through now our essential amino acid supplementation that we can get albumin levels up. So these are important endpoints and important factors that determine a good outcome. And so we can do all of these incredible things through nutrition.
Yeah, glutamine's probably been one of the ones that I feel like about 5-6 years ago, you hardly heard anybody talking about it. And then as the data has come out, it's become, much more popular and rightly so. It's definitely one of those things I see that moves the needle whenever it comes to repair, to, immune function, recovery. We see tremendous improvements when people start adding that in.
Yeah.
Certainly, its components to healing and to glutathione production are like, it's incredible what it can do to add that. What kind of levels should people be shooting for if they're in like a repair phase for glutamine? What's your thoughts on some of that?
We have in one of our, it really depends on the, kind of which product. We have 7 grams of glutamine in one of our products, which we kind of a recommended dose. There is data on sort of efficacy around the 5 gram dosage of glutamine, but it is one of those compounds that is considered conditionally essential. So when you have a state of trauma, your immune system is compromised, and one of the things that you really need to do is boost your glutamine levels. And so it is a critical compound, and really any patient that's recovering should really think about that as a core part of their recovery regimen. I'm going to throw a random number. Let's say 75% finished with editing my first book on health transformation. And certainly there's a large portion of it that goes to health and supplementation. And one of the things I talk about a lot in there is like, I dislike the word supplement now because there's so much connotation that comes with it, because we think it's like, it's something we don't need. Like, oh, it just supplements that a little bit. And I'm like, it doesn't describe what we're talking about here. Like, that's not an accurate way, at least the connotation. The actual definition might match, that it like enhances and really elevates the performance of it. But what most people think of as supplement, and you start talking about something like glutamine, if you don't have it, it categorically changes your recovery from a positive outcome to, hey, I'm not healing. Doc, what's going on? Was the surgery not successful? You're like, that's not
that's not a supplement. That's an essential compound that's needed. I was like, I don't know if we need a new word for these things.
So it's funny that you say that, Dr. Hines, because we don't use supplement in our vernacular. And you'll hopefully hear this more and more if we do a good job of it, we call it NutriPharma. And the reason we call it NutriPharma is we're trying to depict this thing that lives in between the world of pharma and the natural world, which has a level of science. It's clinically graded. It has a level of study and research and efficacy, and is developed in a methodology and an approach that is much more pharma-like. It's very focused in its delivery and its application. So we're using that term for the exact reason that you outline, which is supplement comes with this baggage and connotation that it's incremental to, and perhaps doesn't have the level of rigor that what we're developing deserves, and so we think it needs new language around it. So thank you for pointing that out.
I like that. I hadn't seen that anywhere, but I may borrow that from y'all. And
absolutely,
we'll get the hashtag NutriPharma. I don't know how hashtags work exactly, but we're gonna give it a shot. No.
Yeah.
Let's go down. And kind of hit some of the other ones that I was very excited on kind of digging into some of y'all's ingredients as I've researched some of these things to see some of the makeup of these things. And obviously you look at the research and you're like, this is stuff that's been studied really well. When you're looking at like adding, the turmeric with ashwagandha. Ashwagandha has become one of my new favorite things that people can cycle on and off of and really get incredible benefits from. What's the ginger and cherry do? That's not something I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so tar, cherry, and ginger are there primarily for their anti-inflammatory effects, whereas ashwagandha is serving. So turmeric, which is curcumin source, tar, cherry, and ginger all have really strong research and data around kind of the inflammatory markers that they're hitting. The ashwagandha is actually there to help kind of more on the cortisol pathways, because it really got some compelling data on the reduction of cortisol. And as we kind of conceive this solution, we really think about kind of addressing things from multiple different pathways to make our product both unique, but is also really solving a real solution. And we thought the cortisol and the role it plays in sort of the cascading responses was an important pathway to hit. And so we think we've got a really unique product, and it's really evidenced by the amount of adoption it's gotten. So we focus on healthcare and medical channels, but I can tell you that in the last just 8 months, just word of mouth, the adoption in professional sports, U.S. military for that product has gone through the roof. And it's because they're using it and seeing benefit and impact in their populations, and they're telling their peers. So now there's countless pro sports teams using that product to manage inflammation.
You mentioned something earlier, and I wanted to kind of go back to it because I've been somewhat diving into this, and it sounds like you've looked at so much of this that I'd love to get your input on it. So when we talk about like the overfed, undernourished, I was trying to find like where have we gone wrong in our food as a society. And really I was like, I'm from South Louisiana. I've got family that farms. So I'm asking my family, I'm like, look, y'all are, 4-generation farmers. What has changed? Like, what are we doing different today that we weren't doing, 100 plus years ago? That means that we're not getting the nourishment from our food. So I got some thoughts from them, but I'd love to hear maybe a more educated response from you.
Well, let me start with a little bit more of an abstract sort of evolutionary timescale. When you think about from an evolutionary perspective, where we've started and where we've come in a very short period of time, we're talking about millions of years of human history. And there's actually a really, really effective diagram which I'll send you. After we record the podcast, where someone said if human history was I think it was a 250-page book, and each kind of this little dot on the graphic was a chapter. So you go through most of human history, and it's hunter-gatherer. And he came down to the very last row of the dots, and he said this is kind of modern history from agriculture to modernity. So what we're saying is for most of human history, this entire graph, we were actually hunter-gatherers, we were eating nuts, raw food, meat, etc. In a very short period of time, we industrialized foods. So we went from agriculture to then manufactured foods. highly processed manufactured foods that have all kinds of fillers, additives, sugar, etc. So our diet fundamentally changed in the blink of an eye, if you look at it through, again, evolutionary lens. And our bodies haven't had the time, quite frankly, to adjust to this changing diet. So I think that's one key factor. I think the other is we went from being upright and active to being, doing what you and I are doing right now, which is sitting for most of the day and being sedentary. And that combination, I believe, along with the amount of stress in our environment and how, our fight or flight response is now constantly being activated, are the three primary drivers of the amounts of illness that we see today. Is the highly manufactured foods we're eating, the fact that we're sedentary, and the fact that we're overwhelmed by stress. And these are the three things that we really have to hit if we're serious about prevention in our society.
How do we do that?
Yeah, and how do we do that when 80% of the U.S. population will tell you that they're not particularly motivated to make any particular changes? It's a real conundrum. It's not easy, and I think the thing is we have to make it easy. So with Nutripharma, our focus is, people tend to have a hard time making dietary changes and stop eating the foods that they're eating, but they're willing to pop pills for some reason. And so if we can design the right pill that is plant-based and organic and is not synthetic and doesn't have a long list of side effects, at least we can move the needle some towards inflammation, a key driver of so much of bad health and illness. At least we can move the needle on inflammation. Blood sugar, another huge crisis, right? Everything that we eat is causing our blood sugar to go up. If we can design the right Nutripharma product that's plant-based and actually reduce blood sugar levels, at least we can move the needle. And people are, as long as it's affordable and we can cover it and get it to them, people are willing to take those products. So we can do things that will start to move the needle as we work on sort of bigger strategies to really kind of shift society into healthier habits. Not an easy lift. We've been trying it for a long time, and we're still getting sicker. So I don't have a panacea for that yet, unfortunately.
Well, it's one of the things, because one of the things we were kind of trading emails about before we did this is like, the adoption and integration of advanced technology into the healthcare practice. And for me, it's always a little bit of a difficult thought is how do we continue to advance with that? And yet at the same time, how do we encourage people to do more natural things? Because everything that I look at, when we get people who are spending more time outside, they're getting more fresh air, they're eating more natural foods, they're moving more naturally, like everything that kind of goes against some of the, advancements that we've had makes people healthier. So I'm I know the advanced technology is an answer in a lot of these cases. And obviously, look, my clinic has everything that we can have from an advanced tech so we can get people out of that. But it's interesting that I want to use that to get people out of pain and get them healthier so that they can go back to doing more natural things.
Yeah, look, I think we technology is coming no matter whether we like it or not, and we're going to become more and more of a technological species. That's just an inevitability, and so I think we have to figure out how to ensure that technology is additive to our health and not subtracting from our health. So I'll just give you an example. Like I use a sleep mask that has headphones in it, and those headphones play meditation music as I'm falling asleep. So that is technology, and I use it to my advantage. I use a fitness app to track my running. I use a fitness app to guide me in my workouts. So that's an example of technology being additive to my health. But the things that you pointed out, like our immersion in nature and eating natural foods and being around our loved ones and more access to my family happens to be in a WhatsApp group together, all of us, even cousins. And so that gives us our social interaction with each other, and we have a great time with that. So we need to train people and educate people on the value of these things that are available to all of us. Nature, so fundamental and so profound. That needs to be a societal level. In urban planning, we need to ensure that access to natural environments is baked into every design that we have. yeah, even in hospital systems now that they're putting in actual natural environments because they know even in an acute short-term care setting, it has such a profound impact on outcomes. So I think there is a role for technology in health, and I do think that if designed well, it really can profoundly help improve health. Like one of the areas that I'm super excited about is how AR/VR can really help improve mental health when used and designed correctly. But there is going to be no substitute for human relationships, no substitute for nature, and no substitute for healthy whole foods. Those are just fundamental, and so we have to figure out how to balance the two.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up kind of like the hospital systems and stuff like that. And I was reading a study, and it was talking about like the decrease in hospitalizations for people who had increased levels of zinc, increased levels of vitamin C. And one of the things that it mentioned in there was like better rest and recovery. And I was like, that's a very low bar in a hospital. It's like being able to actually get quality rest and recovery in a hospital when you're getting, they come in and wake you up every 2 or 3 hours and stuff. Like, when do you need this natural recovery the most is when we take it away from you because we just haven't had a good understanding of, what that is. So like, I love what you're saying. Like, is there a way that we can kind of, use technology to make sure that we're getting the benefits that, the natural environment would provide for us? Like, that's probably the way out of this in a way where we actually can get forward and our technology is not taking away health and letting us be more sedentary. It's actually telling us, hey, get up. You didn't go for a walk today. By the way, your HRV is low, so we need to make sure that you're prioritizing sleep and nutrition for the next couple of days, whatever. You kind of go down the
ideally
list.
You'd be in a recovery bed, surrounded by plants and nature and all that kind of stuff. But in the absence of that, are there some brain hacks that we can use to kind of create the illusion of being in an environment that's soothing and natural and all that kind of stuff, So, a lot more to be done there. And I think we have to fundamentally, first of all, re-emphasize and place importance on these things that we know are important. So part of our care philosophy and caring for patients is this, what we call multimodal approach. It's not just about one node, it's about multiple nodes. It's about lifestyle, nutrition, stress, anxiety, functional readiness, patient's education. All these things matter, and we have not put enough emphasis on them because we've just become a profitability machine, an efficiency machine, and in that efficiency, we've cut out anything that seems not to be absolutely essential.
I want to come back to joint health in just a second, but you kind of mentioned that. Is this the tip of the iceberg for y'all? Like, is this something, like, I hear you talk about these things and I'm like, are y'all you look at the Amazon model where they started selling books, but that wasn't the actual, like, hey, in a decade, we're not just doing books. Is it, hey, let's go to Nutripharma and that gets us in the door so that we can have an impact in a bunch of different ways and lifestyle changes and, mindset changes and health activity changes? Is that where Men goes at some point?
You've been very prescient in a lot of things that you said in our discussion because we've already gone there. We've introduced as a companion to our Nutripharma a patient care model where we provide our practice partners extended care outside of the walls of their practice. So imagine you see a patient in your practice and you know that because of your limited bandwidth, the stuff that you're really good at doing is within the walls of the hospital, but there's a whole bunch of things at home that we can be doing for the patient that are really important, and that's where we act as partners to the practice. And we do things like check in on the patient, provide them coaching, guidance, taking that whole multimodal philosophy and approach to ensuring that we're addressing all those other nodes of care. And I can tell you, patients are loving it, and it's having an impact on their sense of care. And as you know, as a sort of a thinker in this space, the more activated a patient is, the more participating in their own care, the better outcomes we see. And so, yeah, we've gone there, and we want to hit all of those nodes and become, a leading provider of those nodes of care.
Let's dive into that for a little bit. What's that look like? Is that are they checking in is that through an app? Is that web based? How's that look?
Yeah, so imagine a patient comes into your environment and you say, look, I really want you to consider this, this additive care program that we've implemented. Once the patient says yes, or you give them the literature, we call them to enroll them in the program. Once they're enrolled, the patient receives a kit from us. That kit contains the NutriPharma products along with a set of technologies that we utilize to kind of interface with them and engage them. We intentionally designed it to be tech light so that it's not an app that's hard for them to learn and cumbersome. We know that that's not the right approach. So our care providers, nurses, dietitians, PTs that are interfacing with the patient over an SMS and Zoom capability. And through that capability, we're serving up content, we're monitoring them, we're taking prompts, hey, how's your pain today? The patient's informing us on their pain. And then all of that data belongs to our partners. It's something that we're capturing for them and giving them insights into how the patient's performing outside of the walls of the hospital, or outside of the walls of the practice. And that, I believe, has to be the future of care. It doesn't end. A lot of patients will tell you, like, I just kind of felt like I was on my own after I was outside of the doctor's office. It was really up to me to do everything. And so this provides that added level of care and attention that a lot of patients really need and value.
Yeah, I love, like, one of the things when we go to like the positive side of technology is like, if we can start to take those things. One of the issues with like nutrition, NutriPharma, supplementation is that the research is really difficult in this world, because you need so many people for us to get accurate data of what happens. But if we're doing that and that continues to grow, at some point you can take the treatment, the results, the activities outside, and aggregate that and be a giant research data output of, hey, look, yeah, this is across 150,000 people, but here's where the needle moved 10% whenever they were following up. And this group of people actually said they were walking 20 minutes a day because they were feeling better. And look what that did. You become a data aggregator, and you can actually start giving actionable information that patients can use, practitioners can use, and be like, look, here's what it is. Here's what you need to do because the successful people did this.
I feel like you read our business plan, because that's exactly where we're headed. Is once we have lots of patients in the platform across numerous sites, we can actually see which interventions are actually having the most impact. We can actually be a little bit predictive about which patient profile will respond better to which particular intervention. So there's lots of insights that we will gather that will allow us to kind of help improve the entire healthcare system. So that's exactly where we're intending to head.
I love it. Yeah, and you look at that and you look at product stuff, and it's like, all these things that we have research that say improve the patient outcomes and stuff, and then can you make that stuff even better by collecting the data? It's like, if there is a positive side to this, if there is something that gets me excited, especially when we're looking at kind of the integration of biotech into the healing process, that's what it is. That's what kind of gets me pumped up, is seeing like companies like this that are starting to say, hey, let's use the data, but use it for positive outcomes and continue to make products better and make, add the things in that we might be missing that can really help people improve better and get us out of some of these, the health epidemic that we're in.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. One of our partner sites that's implementing our platform, their research director was in a call with us and said, can we use your platform to ask the patient, put this as in a post-op environment, ask the patient, did you go see your primary care physician? And then what specifically did you see your primary care physician for? And I said, of course you can. You can ask any question you'd like to the patient. And she literally got up in the room and gave high fives to her MDs that were in the room, because she's never been able to access that data. And that insight on why did you see your primary care physician can be a very important outcomes input to her that she's never had as a clinical researcher. So there's a lot that you can do once you close that feedback loop with patients to really understand how these interventions are actually impacting and influencing them. So we really hope to be an important partner to providers going forward to give them new insights that they never have had. I'll give you another just example is one other physician partner of ours grades patients on expected outcome based on their profile coming into the surgery. So you had a particular patient rated an A, and the patient ended up having a D outcome, and he was very perplexed. We were able to tell the doctor through the Fitbit activity that the patient was way overexerting themselves in terms of the number of steps they were taking than they should have been at that point in their rehabilitation post-op. So that gave him insights and data on the level of activity that's appropriate. And we all have theories around how much activity is appropriate, how much weight bearing is appropriate. But this actually gave him real live data in practice that the patient was in fact overdoing it relative to what they should have been, and that resulted in more inflammation, more pain, et cetera. So these are examples of hopefully what we'll be able to unlock as the data set gets larger and larger.
It's wild that you say that. When kind of at the height, let's say over the last kind of 2 years, some of the interventions we do, we were helping a lot of people with kind of like the post-COVID syndrome, the inflammatory cytokine response that caused a lot of cell stress. And one of the things we were doing completely like inadvertently was tracking steps for people. And, in general, in my patients, I'm like, look, hit your 10,000 steps a day and your outcomes are going to be better. And when we started looking across the patients that we were tracking, the people that were above, say, 8,000 steps a day were getting worse. They were testing the system more than it could handle because there was still inflammation and cell stress in there. And so we were communicating with our physician liaison in Chicago and saying, like, look, this is what we're getting from, these people who are wearing pedometers, basically. This was very low tech.
Yeah.
And it ended up impacting a lot of people because he's like, that's crazy. I'm going to start getting people to do the same thing. And over about 6 months saw very, very readily that in those early stages, the people who overexerted themselves had a much higher risk of ending up in like a post-COVID type of symptom. But you say that and you're like, if we had no way of getting that data, and just ask the question, to be honest, but if you're a physician or a hospital that sees that person, you never know that. You're never getting that information. And you're just saying, hey, look, sometimes you get better, sometimes you don't. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fascinating data. It would never even occur to me that in a COVID environment, the level of activity could actually result in inferior outcomes. That's very, very fascinating.
Let's jump back to a little bit of the kind of like joint health and some of the compounds that y'all are getting out to people. When y'all were studying this, was there any major like aha moments of like, oh, this is really something that people are missing, that other companies are missing, that other physicians or compounders are not catching? Was there any major ahas?
Yeah, so to be very precise, we've got a couple of different solutions that can kind of play in the joint health space. One is perioperative recovery. So, and this research goes back to Dr. Dreyer and Owen, who started in 2013. And Dr. Hans Dreyer, is a muscle physiologist at the University of Oregon, started to contemplate whether or not, so muscle atrophy, we said, is a significant problem in ACL and joint replacement, rotator cuff, et cetera, where there's surgical shock and there's disuse and you can lose a lot of muscle, and that can delay return to function for a long time. So his thesis was, could the right blend of high dose of essential amino acids actually help mitigate that atrophy? Would that then result in better muscle, better return to function? So that randomized trial was published in 2013. That was a proof of concept and actually demonstrated that you can in fact do exactly that. Then a subsequent study was done in 2018 to show that it's actually safe, that there was no adverse impact to the blood profile, and the results were replicated. Since then, now there have been numerous RCTs with a essential amino acid supplementation in the perioperative environment. We're actually doing one in ACL this year to extend that data that has been replicated to show now pretty unequivocally across multiple sites, multiple studies, that muscle atrophy is down, muscle function is up, faster return to function, inflammation's down, et cetera. And so all this data is kind of more on the perioperative environment. Now, I know there's a set of compounds that have traditionally been kind of used in joint health. We haven't gone into any of the chondroitin research, any of that kind of stuff to really should look at sort of what we want to do in joint health. Now, I can tell you that our inflammation product, the one that we've discussed the compounds on, the curcumin, the tart cherry ginger, and ashwagandha, we've done studies, and first of all, it's backed by really good data on the compounds. And the studies that we did, 80% of the patients reported increased mobility and reduced swelling and pain in their joints. So we've got really good patient PROMS data and then prior RCT data showing that this is having an impact on joint pain and joint mobility. Now we have to extend that research. Every product of ours, we do kind of proof of concept and then we move it into more extensive RCTs. So that particular product needs to go into the next set of randomized trials to demonstrate unequivocally that that is in fact the case.
Yeah. So if somebody's coming off of, or like, let's say they're having an ACL and, just out of like a recommendation, even if we're kind of needing more data on that, what would be kind of, if you were creating, hey, here's the perfect stack of things that you should take, what would that look like?
Yeah, I would have them take, our repair and recover product first, kind of 4 or 5 weeks pre-op. I would have them get on to our joint replacement product, which, once we get the ACL study done. And just to state that Dr. Dreyer has been doing research in the lab on a younger population with the same intervention, has seen the same characteristics. Muscle T cells are up, inflammatory markers are down. So we have a high degree of confidence that in the ACL environment, we're going to see the same results we saw in an older environment. So I'd have them get on 1 week pre-op, the essential amino acids, take that through 2 weeks post-op, and then get on to a set of inflammatory products like our Perform Daily inflammation product, along with just a maintenance nutrition product like our Regenerate product, which is really, we think, stand out for muscle health. That complement of, and many practices have started to use this kind of whole spectrum of care interventions for patient populations. So that would be kind of a best-in-class approach to addressing recovery from an ACL.
And so, like in the essential amino acids, that's leucine, that's L-tryptophan. What's that? What's that?
It's 9 essential amino acids. All of the 9 essential.
Oh,
amino
okay.
acids.
So it's got everything.
Yeah, it does.
I did notice in one of those things, we had Dr. Barry Tan on the podcast. I don't know if you've heard his name, but like brilliant researcher in vitamin E. That y'all had a natto seed extract. Or a natto seed powder, maybe, and it says for color. But I was like, as thoughtful as these guys are, there's no way that that's an accident. That's the version of vitamin E that was chosen to be put in there. Have you dug into the research on the annatto plant?
I have to get my scientist to reply to you on specifically that choice of vitamin E compound. That one escapes me at the moment on this.
I saw it and I was like, that's incredible. So, essentially there's a few versions of vitamin E.
Yeah.
And tocotrienol is the version that's really healthy for blood flow, for recovery, for vascular support, and for inflammation. And that is the annatto plant is the only plant, as far as we know, that is 100% of tocotrienol. Most of the other versions of vitamin E have tocotrienol and tocopherol, like split in some percent. So when I saw they picked the annatto plant as the one that gets added in there, I was like, this is too good. That's too brilliant.
Yeah, so we've got
give them a pat.
A science board of a number of PhDs that come at the problem from different dimensions. One is sort of like acclaimed in the world of sort of the natural world, natural products. The others are we've got 2 nationally acclaimed nutritionists and then a bunch of sort of our pharma PhDs. We intentionally take a sort of multidiscipline approach to this. So I'm sure there's a very, very strong, good rationale the science team has for why they chose that specific form of vitamin E.
It's brilliant. It's great. How do y'all think about when it comes to like the whole world of like NutraPharma, the testing part of this stuff? Like where does that come in if we're doing everything perfect? I know right now it's kind of like we know the vast majority of people, don't have a lot of this stuff in the quantity they need to heal. But if we had the perfect situation, how do you think about testing? Where would that come in? What are we looking for?
Yeah, multiple stages. So first and foremost, as you develop the actual formulation and you've selected your compounds, you want to select for compounds that have a strong body of clinical evidence behind them. So we're always looking for compounds that have established body of scientific evidence. There's a scientific dossier around sort of their safety and efficacy. Second, when you formulate it, you actually formulate for things like bioavailability, the right dosing, non-adulteration, etc. So you've got a formula that has high integrity. Then when you actually go into testing that product, you have to do randomized trials, the gold standard placebo-controlled randomized trials to demonstrate that it actually works and that it's actually safe. And then finally, when you've done all that research and you've formulated and you've got your clinical data, you also have to ideally, if you're a high quality firm and really focuses on quality, manufacture at facilities that are FDA, CGMP compliant, that have NSF certifications, et cetera. And then the final step, which is something that Men does, that very, very few companies do, is do independent third-party testing. So you send your final product to a third-party lab that then goes off and does the testing on the compounds to demonstrate that, one, what's on the label is actually in the product. So they can validate that the nutrients are at the levels that you actually said on your label. Second, that it's not adulterated, that it doesn't contain anything harmful. And so when you take that combination, that body of kind of what I just described in terms of a process, you end up with a pharma grade type of product that can be reliable. And that's really what we're focused on, is developing something that is in a class by itself in terms of the quality. And thank you for flagging that, because it's really important. A lot of people don't know that. They'll pick up a product at a store, retail store, and they have no idea whether the level of nutrients are at the appropriate level of dosing. That's just one component. Is the dosing enough to actually even have the efficacious effect? And most, in fact, don't, unfortunately. So you really got to pay attention to those types of things.
Yeah, I get this question a lot from people, and you kind of answered it in some way, but I'd love to hear you kind of talk about it a little bit deeper. Is they're like, how do I know if this compound, this nutrient, or this supplement that I'm taking is good? Is there some resources that you point people to if they're like looking for some of these things? Like, how do I know if they've done third-party testing? How do we know if they've got some NSF certifications? Is there resources that you would tell people to look for?
There is a website called Examine, which you can go in and actually put the name of a compound in, and that website will give you kind of the indications for that compound as well as the clinical data supporting that compound. So that does exist. There isn't a central authority today that is grading, if you will, dietary supplement companies to say this one has independent tests, it has the RCTs. And I think that would be a very, very welcome innovation in the industry, where there is kind of this independent grading of the quality of these products, but it doesn't exist today. But there is a database called examine.com that you can go to look up compounds and the level of science behind each one of those compounds.
It sounds like you've thought about a lot of this stuff so much. So I would be interested to see how you answer this. But so, like, for you, what does a normal day and week look like from an activity level, and then like a supplemental intake, whether that's vitamins, minerals, and a Nutri-Pharma? What's a typical day? What's a typical week look like?
Yeah,
what are you doing? What are you taking?
I do a lot of intermittent fasting now. So the days that I'm even when I'm kind of not intermittent fasting, so I'll get up in the morning. The first thing I do is have a full glass of water, and then I'll take vitamin D. I take fish oil. I take our Men daily inflammation product, and then I guzzle green tea all day long, and I drink a turmeric tea pretty much all day long. I'll typically have a meal at kind of noon, and I have a Regenerate shake, which is one of our products. It's just excellent for muscle health. I'll have a tablespoonful of olive oil. I have 2 tablespoons full of olive oil every single day, and then I'll a very, very light lunch. And then kind of my main meal is usually around 5 or 6 p.m. is when I kind of have, like, after we've done our conversation, I'll probably have my main meal. I try to stick to something healthy, but then I'll also have our heart health product, our controlled glucose product, and then another serving of our Perform Daily Inflammation product. So I'm really hitting inflammation. I'm hitting oxidative stress. I'm getting my omegas in me and my fish oils, and I'm getting my vitamin D. I feel like those are the kind of the key compounds that are really important. Sufficient vitamin D, the omegas, keeping inflammation in check and keeping oxidative stress in check. If you do those kind of things, and you give your body a break from eating from time to time, time to just exert energy towards other processes. Those seem to be kind of prevalent kind of approaches that are, everything that I read and come across in all the podcasts that I watch, and the kind of the leading thinkers, is showing really good evidence around the impacts that has.
It's interesting because if I really had to point to something that started to make the shift, as we were talking about whenever we started our conversation, this is one of the biggest things that I've changed completely on. One of the things that really started to make me think, oh, we need to look at this was actually fasting and some of Dr. Walter Longo's work. And we started looking at how big changing someone's like eating, what they were taking in could change their inflammation, their joint health, their stem cell production, their pain levels, incredibly. And as we started to talk about, hey, you're a patient, you match this demographic really well, this avatar really well, we should actually take you through like a 5-day fasting mimicking diet. It opened this window, and I didn't catch this at the time, but it opened this window to thinking of, well, if that changes, what should they do after? And if they don't have stuff in their body, in the quantities to help them heal, then like we started looking at all the stuff that me and you are talking about.
Fascinating.
But the input to it was actually starting to tell people like, hey, maybe we need to look at your feeding window. Maybe we need to look at doing some fasting stuff to get your body reset so it's functioning correctly. And then we can start from a clean slate and start putting the things in now that your body is not significantly inflamed and stressed, and your hormone production is kind of all over the map, and then we can correct some of these base levels of nutrient, vitamin, minerals, and really improve some things. But
for your listeners, I think anyone that's kind of looked into fasting, I think there's kind of two primary interesting processes that to me have convinced me that it's kind of a good thing to do from time to time. One is just not having the constant insulin spikes that is caused by eating all the time. So every time you eat, your body is having an insulin spike and destabilizing blood sugar. So just giving your body kind of some break from that. The other is a process called autophagy, which kicks in after a certain window of fasting. It depends on kind of who you speak to, but apparently 18 hours is kind of where autophagy starts to kick in, and it's a built-in mechanism that our bodies have to kind of cleanse, look for energy, sources of energy. I'm starving, so where should I go for energy? And that built-in mechanism starts to scavenge for areas where it can get energy from it. It turns to things like bad cells and dead cells and all that kind of stuff. So those two processes are very interesting, and more and more data is supporting the fact that giving your body a break from just eating from time to time can have really profound health effects.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned the like, I guess, data acquisition, who you're listening to, studying from. Who are some of the big names that are books that you recommend? Any of the kind of lead scientists that you're reading?
There's one I'm reading right
studying?
now here. It's called the Anti-Cancer Living, and it was recommended by Dr. Rosen at Advocate Aurora. Talks about kind of the multiple prongs and approaches to how we manage disease. There's two others that I pull up. One is called The Disease Delusion. If you can see that, it's an excellent book. And then last one I'll pull up here. It's called How Healing Works. So that's kind of on the book side of things. Recent ones that I read, and then Huberman, who's he's got a great podcast. He's blown up. I listen to a fair amount of his stuff, and then just I scour for kind of interesting, discussions by sort of scientists and thinkers every kind of chance I get to make sure that I'm aware of kind of the latest thinking. So
I love it.
Suggestions.
When we're looking at this and we're kind of going back to the global level, we're taking the 30,000 foot view. If we're successful in the next decade of improving health across the whole society, what things do you see us doing? What boxes are getting checked?
Yeah, there's so much exciting stuff going on in the realm of health innovation. There's stuff going on in starting with genomics and CRISPR, and there's AI and large data sets and predictive capabilities, and new therapeutics and new biopharma and all that kind of all this stuff is important. But I go back to ultimately to prevention. We can't live in a system that's getting people sick in the first place and then all of our dollars and our attention going to treating them. And that's what we have today. 90% plus of our healthcare dollars go towards treating you when you're sick. So we talked about sort of why you get sick, this bad food, sedentary lifestyle, all kinds of stresses. So we get you sick, and then we pull out the scalpel and try to do the things to undo what we did bad to you. So the future has to be about prevention. It has to be about lifestyle modification and all the things that we can do to keep you healthy and increase well span. So I think that's where the most exciting innovations are going to come. Is how do we do that in a low cost way, in an at scale way that can reach a lot of people and the people that need it most. So we got to address these health inequities on. The people that are unfortunately getting the sickest are the ones that have access to, these huge, giant soda drinks that are full of sugar, but they're consuming it daily because it's the cheapest thing that's available on the corner block. So changing our food system so there's less of these manufactured foods, more nutritious choices available. That sounds very low tech, but I think giving people access to healthier foods, increasing the amount of healthy environmental spaces or natural spaces available to us, increasing our access to each other through technology. Like I said, I've got my entire family on a WhatsApp group that seems small, but literally every single day we're texting each other some trivial, goofy little thing that adds to our enjoyment in life. And I think those things will have actually the most profound effect on prevention. And so prevention has to be the key.
Yeah, I'll say this, but we don't have to spiral out completely because it's probably a whole nother conversation. But you say that, and I think you're 100% correct. And I wonder if the way that we provide healthcare and pay for healthcare doesn't have to change at some point for us to accomplish what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, I think the incentive model, unfortunately, there's powerful entrenched interests that don't want the system to change because they're making the money and their livelihood on exactly what exists today. I think so. I think you're right. I think there needs to be massive disruption in sort of how we think about, our entire healthcare system. So if we can start to introduce more things that keep people well and not going to the sick care system in the first place, I think that's got to be a starting point. And so it's starting to happen, right? So the Biden administration announced $8 billion initiative around food as medicine, lots of private equity and ventures starting to invest. We've got venture looking at us and investing in us. And these are the signs of finally of some change coming. And so the more we can invest in upfront prevention, I think the better for society in the long run. And it pays. It provides an ROI, and that's the most important thing.
Eziah, where can people find more about Mend? Where can they follow some of your thoughts? Where can they kind of get all the information for some of this stuff?
Thank you. I love talking to people, so if you ever want to reach out to me directly about something, I'm just Eziah, EZIAH, at mend.me. And then our URL is obviously mend.me. We're excited about where we're headed. We love talking to smart people like Dr. Hines and would welcome continuing the dialogue and the discussion. This is an important area topic, and thank you for championing it, and thank you for being a voice for something that is absolutely critical. We're in a crisis, and it's going to take a lot of smart minds to get us out of the mess we're in.
Yeah, I love what y'all are doing. I look forward to like 5 years from now being like, before they went crazy, and we're a household name. I remember talking to Eziah. Eziah, we ask all our guests, if you could tell people one thing that they could do today to improve their health, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about it. I'll say it in the abstract. It's all about little changes and little habits. Habits are everything. So you don't think about running a marathon tomorrow. What you think about is going for a little run around the block, and then you make a block, 2 blocks, and 3 blocks, and so on and so forth. So I would say start to introduce little changes into your daily lifestyle. Don't try to go for radical changes because radical changes won't last. So you start introducing something anti-inflammatory into your diet. That's one of the most important things you could do is to just get inflammation down in your system and get blood sugar stabilized and down. So if you can start to do those two things, is just get your inflammation down, get your blood sugar down, you've already taken a big step towards improved health. Obviously, sleep is profoundly important. So if your sleep is disturbed, start to introduce some mechanisms. Like I said, I use an eye mask with meditation music, and I start to get into a ritual before I do my sleep, and then interact with I know this again sounds very obvious, find ways to interact with your loved ones more. And those 3 things will start to introduce health changes that'll be quite profound, and they're not huge, heavy steps that you have to take.
That's brilliant. Listen to him, people. He's dropping knowledge bombs here. Eziah, is there anywhere else that people should look for y'all? Are you on social? Do y'all have some tags on? Is there anywhere that you're?
We are. We're on
present?
Instagram. It's our Instagram handle is Men Nutrition. I'm not particularly very active on Twitter or any of those types of things, but we're on Instagram and LinkedIn. And but again, would welcome chatting with anyone. Health and wellness is our passion. That's what we love to talk about.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing awesome information. We'll put links to everything that we talked about in the show notes. Y'all can find that at DerrickHines.com. And for any patient info, we'll tag Mend. And you can go to acadianapain.com. You can find all that stuff in the show notes. Have a great day, everybody. Do that one thing to get a little bit healthier today.